An emotional day in Rockford as Romona and Jacob Schupbach were laid to rest on Saturday with dozens of family and friends in the community there to pay their respects. Romona and Jacob were two of the four people killed in a stabbing attack in Rockford on March 27th that also left 7 others injured. The suspect, 22-year-old Christian Soto, faces 11 charges of murder and intent to kill and 2 counts of home invasion. Dozens attended a visitation for the Schupbachs at Crosspoint Church in Rockford Saturday morning. This was followed by a memorial service at the same location. There is an online fundraiser created to fund these memorial services, and as of Saturday afternoon, it has raised more than $33,000 of its $20,000 goal. Romona was 62 and Jacob was 23 years old. Dozens of family, friends, and the community also honored the life of 18-year-old Jason Jenkins, who was fatally stabbed on Sunday, March 24th while working at a Rockford Walmart. Jason's funeral was at Christian Union Full Gospel Church Ministries on Saturday morning. He was then laid to rest at Cedar Bluff Cemetery. There is an online fundraiser to benefit Jason's twin brother Jasper. Timothy Carter, the man accused of stabbing and killing Jenkins, now faces a hate crime charge.